when Bonds broke the record, he was there. He was there. He took part in it. He did not. I guess, shy away from the moment. What was his take on all of that with Bonds? Now that we see his statement today, Bob.
Rich, it's a measure of just how classy and gracious he was. That when the Giants asked him to do it in anticipation of Bonds hitting 756, he agreed to do it. They stopped the game. There's a celebration in San Francisco, and then all of a sudden, on the jumbotron, there appears Henry Aaron with a very gracious message of congratulations to Barry Bonds. And if Hank was annoyed or felt some affront that his record was not only broken, but broken under the circumstances that it was, which we all understand, he was too gracious and too big a man to ever say that, to ever grouse about that publicly. And I think in many ways, not just with regard to the record, but with regard to his whole life, his career and his whole life, for a very, very long time, Hank was very comfortable with what he had achieved, the life that he led, and the way the vast, vast majority of the American public viewed him. So he didn't have to offer any explanation or any, well, yeah, but I did this and I did that. You never heard anything like that from him. What he did, both as a player and as a person, spoke for itself. And I think he had great peace of mind about that. Every year at Cooperstown, when the Hall of Famers come back, and it's such a striking scene when you see all these bold-faced names on that stage in Cooperstown, and they're all warmly greeted, and the applause is greater for the Sandy Koufaxes and the Willie Mazes and some others, and understandably, there's levels of greatness. But when Henry was introduced in recent years, the appreciation had a different tone to it. There was just an abiding respect and appreciation. You could feel it in the way the crowd responded to him. And then afterward, at the gatherings in the Hall of Fame, in the gallery where the Hall of Fame plaques are, Henry would sit, especially in the later years of his life. He had trouble standing. And he would sit. And he was such a humble man. None of this came from him. There was no bravado about him. But not only would fans and various baseball people, but Hall of Fame players themselves, greatest of the great, would come to him as if they were coming to a dignitary of some kind. And he would sit there and almost receive them. And none of that came from any sense of ego on his part, but that's just the way people felt about him. To see a Ken Griffey Jr. go toward him with the deepest respect. I'm talking to Mr. Aaron now. No one else. I'm talking to Mr. Aaron now. That's the place he held, and it was a place he had earned.
A few more minutes left with Bob Costas here on the Rich Eisen Show. What do you think the conversation between Hank Aaron and Joe Morgan is going to be like tonight? Bob, what do you think about that one?
Well, they knew each other well. I had great regard for both of them. Happy to know that, or to be able to say that I was friends with both of them. If it happens that way, the way some people think it does, and it would be nice to think that it does, then it isn't just a conversation with Joe Morgan or Jackie Robinson. It's a conversation with Babe Ruth. It's a conversation with every great player who ever played. If that's the way it plays out.
Yeah, it's amazing. Lasorda will be there too, right? I mean, it's just you're right. It's been a really tough year, Bob. It's been a rough year for some living Hall of Famers who have left us.
Well, one more thought here.
Sure.
I think very often we think of people defined by the big public stage circumstances of their lives. But how they respond to those circumstances is an outgrowth of who they were to begin with. I think of a conversation I once had with Arthur Ashe, and I made what I thought was a good point, and he thought it was too. I said, the way you carried yourself, Arthur, off with such grace and class and dignity. In part, was that the same thing as with Jackie Robinson, who was a more combative person by nature than Arthur Ashe was? But you'll recall that Branch Rickey had the famous conversation with Robinson and said, at least for the first few years, you can't fight back. You have to carry yourself with great reserve if this experiment is going to work. And Robinson knew, as unfair as it was, that since all eyes were on him, any misstep would be misinterpreted and used against him and against the cause. So, Arthur, did you understand that? When you were the only black face at Wimbledon, on the court or in the stands, the only black face there, was that part of why you felt an obligation to carry yourself the way you did? And he said, what you're saying is true, and I understood that it was true of Jackie Robinson. But the main reason I was the way I was and am the way I am was that when I was a kid, if I wasn't, my father would have kicked my ass. So whether it's Arthur Ashe or it's Hank Aaron, whomever you want to name, who you are in the big circumstances is a product of who you were in the small circumstances.
Bob, you're the best. Now that you have placed that in perspective, now I'm thinking, what's the conversation with Muhammad Ali going to be like, right? And Arthur and Ash joining Jackie, welcoming Hank Aaron in. It's just I'm getting emotional just thinking about it, Bob. I really am.
And Rich, when people say, and I hope this has been discredited except in other weird bubbles, stick to sports. It hasn't always been African-American players and athletes, but predominantly it has been. Why? Because for the longest time, sports and some aspects of entertainment were the places where black Americans were able to break through first and command people's attention. And since sports is basically a meritocracy, it's hard to deny the greatness of someone who establishes themselves like Muhammad Ali did, or Arthur Ashe, or Hank Aaron, or whomever. But this idea of stick to sports, sports sometimes, I'm not saying that every pronouncement by every black athlete is automatically correct or automatically to be agreed with. I don't believe that everyone with a Twitter account is automatically Frederick Douglass in Nikes, but there is a long and proud history of black athletes making a difference and not only representing other black Americans, but forcing white Americans to focus on the legitimacy of the points they were making, either making directly or symbolically. And Hank Aaron is very, very near the top of that list. He is an important American, not just an important baseball player.